Before getting into today's episode, I did want to make a quick announcement regarding the Grim and Whim podcast and YouTube channel. My interests are definitely leaning more and more towards topics like true crime. However, those videos do take a lot more time. There is more research I have to do, trying to fact check that research because a lot of times different sources will state different things. And also, I try to summarize in my script the most important details. Otherwise, the videos would be incredibly, incredibly long. And yeah, those videos definitely take a lot more time compared to my Reddit readings, which are a lot easier for me to make. So what I'm thinking is that I will still do Reddit readings because I do love them. However, I'm going to simplify the visual component to these videos. And who knows, once I fine tune everything and I get faster with, recording and editing and just the whole, content making process, maybe I'll get to a point where I can do 2 videos a week. Maybe like a Reddit reading and also a paranormal pondering or a true crime case, things like that. And so stick with me. I'm doing my best. And thank you so much. I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who has stuck with me as I figure out my channel and the podcast. This has been a fun learning process for me. However, I am not the best at technology. I'm still getting used to it, and I'm hoping to make my channel better and better. And so stick along for the ride. But with all that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Today, we will be looking at 4 stories from the subreddit r/ghoststories. The first story is titled, "This literally just happened, still shaking." Something really creepy just happened to me. As I was driving home, a little girl ran out in front of the car, and we both slammed on our brakes. I thought she hit her, so I got out to check, and so did the other lady. Guys, we couldn't find her. She wasn't under the car. She wasn't on the ground or on the side of the road. We both saw her, but I swear she just vanished. I'm super freaked out. I got my phone out to call an ambulance and everything. There's an update to this story, so I thought I would read that update as well because it definitely adds more context to the story. So I was really, really freaked out last night, and I realized I could have been a bit more forthcoming with details. Everything happened so fast. I'm going to try my best to remember as much as possible. The road is called Old 22 in Pennsylvania near the Kutztown area. There's no local legends or anything that talk about a ghost girl on the road, as far as I'm aware, and there hasn't been any accidents or deaths at that spot in at least 30 years, so if something did happen, it's definitely not recent. There's 2 large open fields on either side of the road, so we would have seen her if she ran away. We both saw her, so it wasn't just our imagination. She was young, maybe 5 or 6. She had light blonde hair and wore a blue dress. I never saw her face. It happened too fast, and I was kind of panicking. We searched the whole area for over 5 minutes looking for her, but there was no sign of her anywhere. We were both freaked out, so she said, "I think it's time to go." I said, "Good idea," and we left. I've lived in this area my entire life, and I drive by this spot almost every day, but I have never seen anything like that. The next story is titled, "Haunted Water Park." I literally downloaded Reddit so I can vent about this because I could get fired if I talk about it. I'm a lifeguard at a water park in Las Vegas. We always brag about how, unlike our competition, we have had 0 casualties at the current location. Stuff always happens, like Tubes will appear in the pool after we just took them all out and stacked them. Chairs will move around after we had just sorted them. Wet footprints on concrete when no one was wet, etc. We joke that we don't get paid enough to fight demons. It was just a joke to us, but not to our supervisors or managers. They always made excuses. It was always the wind, or I moved it, or they're my prints. They always got angry at us and said that someone could overhear us and complain. They even went as far as to threaten us with a defamation lawsuit if we talked about it on social media. Weird, right? If the park wasn't haunted, why would they care so much about us talking about it? I never cared because I believe my supervisors and my managers. Maybe they did move the chairs. Maybe they dipped their feet in the pool and walked away. That was until last month. It was about 10 p.m. and we had just finished cleaning the park, and I had to stay a bit later because I was getting a ride from my supervisor, Ryan. We were the few people left in the park, so we were doing our final walkthrough, just to make sure everything was clean. We only had a flashlight and a few light posts illuminating our path around the park. We were walking by some slides when I hear someone say, "Hello?" I look at Ryan, who didn't seem to hear it. Then we heard her again. "Hello?" I freaked, and Ryan, again, didn't seem to hear it. "Did you not hear that?" I said to Ryan. He shrugged and continued walking. I stopped and said I didn't want to do the walkthrough with him. He rolled his eyes and said if I didn't, I am refusing to work, which isn't a good thing to say to your supervisor. He told me I was probably just hearing things. I got a hold of myself and continued walking. We started getting to the back of the park where the light posts were dimmer, and it was much quieter since we were further from the running water and the slides. We started talking about school and college and what we were going to do when season ends, when I heard it again, but it sounded closer this time. "Hello? Anyone there?" She sounded very confused and tired. I jumped, and again, Ryan did not care at all. I was so freaked out I started feeling nauseous. I wanted to go home, but Ryan was my ride, so I had to stay. What happened next haunts me. After we heard the voice, we heard what sounded like someone climbing out of the lazy river, soaking wet. No one else is here. If they were, they would be in the office. No one should be swimming. Ryan was angry. He thought maybe a lifeguard snuck into the lazy river. He turned around and started yelling. "What the? Go home, this isn't fun." He froze. I said a quick prayer and turned around. There was a lady, soaking wet, wearing a park shirt with our logo on it. But the logo looked very 2000s. I know what our shirts look like. I stand in the shop all the time to get AC. I have never seen that shirt. She was hunched over and her hair covered her face. She spoke. "Hello? Can you help me?" Ryan grabbed my arm and we bolted to the office. Lifeguards weren't allowed inside the office ever. It's a whole thing, but he let me come inside. He pulled one of the managers into the supply room and shut the door. Another supervisor started asking me if I was okay. I was breathing heavily and couldn't speak, but I nodded yes. Ryan and the manager came out of the room, and Ryan grabbed his stuff and said, "Let's go." We got in his car and he said, we needed to stop by the gas station first. When we pulled in, he told me to type my address into his phone while he pumped gas. When he got in the car, I broke the silence. What just happened? He turned the car on and started driving. I can't tell anyone. It's like a park secret, but I'll tell you if you swear you won't tell anyone. I swore. Back in 2002, before the location of the park was built, There was a park on the Strip. It was the only water park in Las Vegas. We only had one casualty, and it was a lady who came in with her family. She got drunk and went into the lazy river, where she sank to the bottom of the river, and because there were so many tubes, the lifeguards didn't see her and she drowned. That's why we have so many lifeguards for the river, and why our tubes are see-through. So, was that her? Yes. Why is she here? I don't know. She's probably confused. She's always asking for help. So you did hear her? Yes, but everyone does when you're in the park late at night. It's a whole different story if you see her. What happens if you see her? Nothing, but it's scary. The car ride was silent for the rest of the way. I still work at that park, but Ryan talked to the managers and convinced them only to let me work morning shifts. Ryan quit recently due to college. I only told 2 coworkers, but only because they have had experiences themselves. The next story is titled, My Husband Was There at His Grave. And before reading this story, I did want to put a quick trigger warning here because the story does mention suicide and suicidal ideation. And so if you aren't in the headspace for that, be kind to your mind, and I will see you in the next episode. My husband died by suicide in June. This put me in a tailspin, which I am only kind of recovering from. To give some context, I have faced depression and suicidal ideation before he passed, and I've been on medication for it for about 3-ish years. He knew how to calm anxiety attacks, and he was a part of my emergency plan. For about 2 weeks after he passed, I knew he was there. I could talk to him like I did in life, and it helped me carry on. I guess I should say that I felt he was there, but either way, these out loud conversations helped. Then after a while, mid-July maybe, he wasn't there anymore. This hurt, but it's part of the healing process. Or maybe he had moved on. Either way, I stopped talking out loud because I felt no one was there. But I still do it when I visit his grave. It helps me feel better. The grave is still unmarked, which bothers me, but I try to leave fresh flowers and scatter the petals of the dead ones I left on the prior visit. It's something. He is buried in a very small cemetery. Cornfields to the east and north. The lawn is not maintained, which I love because it's not artificial. He is in nature, or as close to nature as one can be with the cemetery requirements. I was visiting him, just talking, late last month or early this month. I told him that things weren't going good. I wanted to die, and work was stressing me out. I stood there in silence for a moment or two. I didn't want to leave him on a bad note, when I felt it. The air. It just stopped. It was like I was in my own atmosphere, a bubble. Nebraska is always windy, and I couldn't hear the corn rustle. I couldn't hear the wind chimes we have marking his grave. My breath caught in the sense that I forgot to breathe because of something amazing. I couldn't hear the wind chimes we have marking his grave. My breath caught in the sense that I forgot to breathe because of something amazing. Not fear, not panic, but awe. Then I got gooseflesh and started to tear up. It was him. He was there with me, in my silence. I rambled out a teary, "Oh, hi. Okay, you're here. Oh." There's no way to explain this, but I knew he was sorry for making me cry, so I reassured him that it was only because he snuck up on me. Then my emotions swung the other way and I started to laugh. that happy cry laugh that people do. I told him I was sorry for waking him up because it must have taken a lot to come be with me, and that I wasn't mad, I just missed him. And no, he just snuck up on me and it's okay. And no, I wasn't going to end it all. I was just really down. But he was here and I was okay. I would be okay. I heard the corn rustling again, and he was, I don't know, fading? So I told him to go back to sleep, that I loved him and was so happy to feel him again. But he needed to go back to sleep. I left the cemetery on a high note, still chuckling like an idiot. I was very skeptical of ghosts and spirits before this, and I still am for the most part. But that moment in the cemetery was different. He hasn't done it since, but I'm not going to push it because I do think it wore him out. It was just so nice. Also, I don't believe in the religious ideas of heaven or hell, but more the idea of peace. I wanted to share this to see if anyone else had something similar or maybe could explain it better. The final story is titled, My Encounter. So back when I was in high school, the theater students would put on a haunted house and a hayride at an old plantation home, ran as a museum during the day. The first couple of years, the haunted house was in the barn, but then we got permission to do it in the actual plantation house. And of course, growing up with high schoolers, everyone always said it was haunted. But there was no actual stories or history of why it was supposedly haunted. Over the course of our first Halloween season in the house, 2 really weird incidents happened that I still haven't quite figured out a reasonable explanation for. So the first one was in one of the upstairs bedrooms. The glass on the windows had multiple panes of glass in them, and you could actually see the different planes of glass, and they were pretty thick. The middle inside pane broke outwards towards the outside balcony, but the 2 outside panes were perfectly fine, and the glass that broke was a jagged circle, so it wasn't the whole pane itself. It reminded me very much of someone throwing a baseball through a window, and it has that little circle, but it didn't shatter the whole window. There were only 3 actors in that room, sitting on the bed talking because it was during our break. Most everyone else was downstairs or in their own rooms. Nobody was out on the outside balcony because we weren't allowed to be. Obviously, they screamed when they heard the noise, and everyone went over to the window, but nobody could figure out why it happened, and the people that ran the place were like, oh, maybe it's just the house settling. Which I guess it could have been. I don't really know how that stuff works, so I've never had an explanation for why it happened. The second one directly involved me, and I really don't have an explanation for this one. So this happened during another one of our breaks. Think of the downstairs of the house as a giant square. There are rooms in the 4 corners, and in the center, there's a hallway that leads from the front door to the back door. And then there's a stairwell that leads upstairs, and under the stairs is another stairwell that leads to the bottom floor. So we all had our snacks and drinks, and we're all sitting in the dead center of the hallway in a circle. We're talking when all of a sudden, the front door slams open, like all the way open, hitting the door frame of one of the side rooms. Our first response was to slightly freak out because we're all out of character, sitting in the floor, eating Oreos and drinking Gatorade. Someone rushed up to close the door. Now, this house had a bottom level that you couldn't really see from the front, but you could see from the rear. And we were on technically the 2nd floor. But because of the way the house sat, it had a huge stairwell on the front porch and an even longer one down the back. Nobody was on the front porch, since the only people that were allowed to be up there were the actors, when they were waiting to take in a group. And the door itself was one of those heavy, tall doors. The back door was not opened, and the basement door was left open at the time, mostly because people were going down there because that's where they kept snacks and costumes and all that kind of stuff. I've tried to think of some crossbreeds that may have done it, or some sort of explanation, but I can't. It wasn't a windy day, and there's no way the door wasn't fully shut because it was so heavy, you kind of had to slam it to close it. Either way, my take on all this was, if there was some kind of ghost, that it wasn't malicious, but more playing a prank on all of the kids that were trying to scare other people, since nothing about these incidents felt malicious. But if you happen to have an explanation as to why those things happen, I'm open to hearing it. So in the story, I'm not sure exactly how old this house is supposed to be. It said it was a plantation house, so I'm assuming that that means it was a house in the Deep South during times of slavery, and so it must be at least hundreds of years old. But having a house that's almost a century home, our house was built in I think either 24 or 1925. I have to double check. So it's either a century home now, or it'll be a century home this, new year in 1920 or in 2025. And so having an old house, I will say the whole idea of the house settling and the noises it makes, it's very real. It's so real. I remember the first night my husband and I were in our house, we kept hearing so many noises and it really freaked me out. But by the end of the week, I was just like so used to it. And so I think, the people that are used to the house and kind of keep up the house, the people who are saying, oh, it's the house settling, there's probably some truth to that, because just my own experience having an older home, it definitely does settle, and it makes these kind of creaky noises, and it's almost as if the house is alive. It's really strange. It's almost like the house is like cracking its bones or something. And it's very bizarre. It's a weird feeling. And my home, like I said, is a century home. So it's been around 100 years, but a plantation home would be at least 200 to 300 years old, if not older, depending on when it was built. I can imagine that the sounds it makes are even wilder because it's been around so long. And so that's probably the most likely situation that's happening. Or, who knows? It could be something paranormal. We never know. Thank you so much for joining me. It's goodbye for now, but I hope to haunt you again soon.